Everyone, and welcome to Archaeology. Today's video is on a subject involving my religion of heathenry. Specifically, in this video, I'm arguing for the existence of a hero cult as well as the veneration of kings in Germanic culture overall. I'm also arguing that heathenry is modern heathenry is well within its rights to create a hero cult around individuals such as veterans of wars, soldiers who died in battle doing heroic deeds, police officers who died in the line of duty doing heroic deeds, as well as individuals who've done heroic deeds overall for our society. So with that in mind, what is a hero cult? Well, hero cults are religious cults where heroic individuals are venerated as either gods or demigods by members of any given society, oftentimes by two different branches of society. One, the lower class, who would venerate these heroic individuals and ask them for help, such as protection, in travel or protection from harm, etc. And by the soldiers or warriors of a society who would venerate these individuals, as they were often, though not always, connected to warfare. And broadly, heroes in hero cults can be divided into two branches: mythical figures and historical and semi-historical figures. Mythical figures are figures who were not real or not historical individuals who were venerated due to their heroic deeds in mythology. One great example of this is Hercules who's venerated for his slaying of monsters and other things in Greco-Roman society. Now, to be fair, Hercules and other Greco-Roman individuals, heroes such as Achilles, have some minor degree of historical inspiration from the Mediterranean Bronze Age due to the existence of the Mycenaean Greeks and the Minoan civilization, but of course that does not mean they were real. And then in the other branch, the semi-historical or historical, this category is where military leaders or kings were deified due to heroic deeds or some other great impact they had on the society as a whole. One such example of this is Guan Yu, a Chinese military leader from the Three Kingdoms era, who is renowned as being one of, if not the greatest warriors and generals of the period. And after he died, he was deified and turned into one of the many war gods of Taoism and Buddhism. So with this in mind, is there any pretext of this existing in Germanic society as a whole? Well, in order to answer this, we have to go back to the beginning. So the beginning of Germanic culture is the Nordic Bronze Age, where the Proto-Germanic culture emerged from the Indo-European expansions into Europe. And during this period, we have a lot of high-status graves for warriors and kings. One such example is the king's grave in Kivik, Sweden, which is actually not the grave of one individual, but two individuals who, as far as the archaeological excavations could tell, were buried at the exact same time and seemed to be high-status warriors rather than kings. Though, to be fair, by the time archaeologists got to the king's grave in Kivik, many of the high-status grave goods that one would expect in a grave like this had been looted, as around 2,000 to 2,500 years had passed since they were interred in this tomb. Plenty of time for looting to happen. But despite that, many very important petroglyphs had been found, such as this one over here showing the so-called sun wheels, which, as I mentioned in my video about sun wheels, recent archaeological excavations, large-scale archaeological investigations for that matter, determined that these probably meant like the spirit realm. And then on this slab, horses, which, as I mentioned in my most recent video, horses were very important to Germanic culture throughout its existence. And then another example of these types of graves is the King's Tomb of Sedan in northern Germany. specifically the town of Seddon and the province of Brandenburg, northern Germany. And what's interesting about this tomb is it shares a lot of cultural similarities with tombs in the Bronze Age Mediterranean, specifically Mycenaean Greece and the cultures of Italy. Which makes sense because due to the archaeological evidence, we know that there was a large-scale trade and cultural exchange between the cultures of Bronze Age Northern Europe, Northern Germany, and Southern Scandinavia, and the Bronze Age Mediterranean, the Mycenaean Greeks, the Minoan civilization, as well as other Bronze Age civilizations in Italy and Egypt. And in the King's Tomb of Seddon, we find many high-quality grave goods. Bronze sword over here, fine jewelry and metalworking, as well as fine pottery, which suggests that this individual was either a high status warrior or a king or chief of some sort. And taken together, these tombs, such as the King's Tomb of Seddon and the King's grave of Kivik, do suggest that there was the existence of some sort of reverence for kings and high status warriors from the very beginning of Germanic culture. Now, to be fair, of course, high status graves for the chiefs and rulers and such are endemic in all civilizations, but this in itself still suggests the existence of one of these types of cultures. But it also doesn't give us a full picture. So the next question is, where do we go next in order to try and flesh out this picture? Well, we now must go around 1500 or so years into the future to the period of time where the Germanic tribes were warring with Rome. And during this period, Tacitus, the Roman historian, mentions a tribe, a Germanic tribe called the Hari or Hurriar, who were the most skilled and fearsome warriors of the Germanic peoples. Not the most powerful tribe, but still the most skilled and most fearsome of the warriors in Germania. And these warriors played a key role in the Germanic wars between the Germanic generals such as Germanicus, as well as in the victory over the Romans at the Battle of Teutoburg Forest. And this was due to the Hari or Horiar being described by Tacitus as attacking it only at night while being painted with dark black and dark gray paint to give themselves sort of a ghostly, undead appearance to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. And therefore were very renowned and feared by both other Germanic tribes as well as the Roman army. And so, with this in mind, one must ask, well, how would these individuals have been venerated? Well, many scholars, such as Rudolf Simek and John Lindau, have connected the words Hari and Hurriar linguistically to mythological figures. Specifically, the mythological Einherjar, or the warriors whom were picked out by the Valkyrie after they died in battle and brought to Valhall to be Odin's elite warriors, especially during Ragnarok. Now, to be fair, as I've said many times, Ragnarok itself was a Christian creation, but we do have earlier texts predating Ragnarok talking about at least one section of the afterlife where warriors would reside. So we have the Hari slash Hurriar to thank for the creation of the Einherjar in Germanic mythology. But it doesn't stop here. Lindau and Simek further connect their ghostly appearance to the Wild Hunt. The ghostly warriors led most of the time by Odin, though often there are other figures, but generally Odin is the most common figure, during the time of Yule on a massive hunt, where if an individual was, say, to cross paths with the Wild Hunt, they would be abducted and inducted into the Wild Hunt, as well as the wild hunt would punish evil beings or individuals depending on the region. So we have two examples where due to their reputation as skilled and fearsome warriors and their role in the wars with Rome, that the Hari and Hurriar were mythologized into ghostly warriors serving Odin, whether it be as the Einherjar or the Riders of the Wild Hunt. But while this is the first instance of Germanic warriors being mythologized during the Roman period, it is not the last instance. We now come back to Hercules or Heracles. So what's interesting about Hercules is Hercules was syncretized by the Germanic peoples with Thor or Thunar or Donar, all the same individual. And at least according to Tacitus, the Germanic peoples saw Thor, Hercules, as an individual who, at one point in time, actually walked among the Germanic tribes and slew many monsters for them, as well as led them into many great victories in war. So, while Hercules and Thor are very much deities who probably were not real individuals, at least in the eyes of the Germanic tribes, Hercules was an individual who had been deified. So it's very acceptable to include Hercules as Hercules in these hero cults, Thor in these hero cults, because that's what the Germanic tribes did. And in fact, as I mentioned in my video about berserkers, Thor and Hercules were both connected to at least one form of berserker or berserker cult. So there we have it. In the Roman period, we have not one but two instances where whether they be real figures such as the Hari and Hurriar, or mythological deity figures such as Thor and Hercules, were inducted into warrior cults and were seen as individuals who had been deified. But with that in mind, we now must continue on, because it's still not the whole picture of Germanic society. The next time period we must look at is the so-called migration period, or the period where Germanic tribes were entering the Eastern and Roman Empire and wreaking havoc. So the first part of the migration period we must look are the Frankish kingdom, specifically the Frankish king Sigebert of Austrasia and his wife Brunhild of Austrasia. And looking at them, we have to ask, well, who would they have been deified as? Who would these Germans, these Frankish rulers who had at this point been Christianized, have been deified as? Well, they were actually mythologized into the Völsunga Saga and the Nibelung, with Sigebert being mythologized into Sigurd and Siegfried, the dragon slayer. And this was likely due to his fending off of the vicious, or at least they had had a reputation of being vicious, the nomadic tribes, the Avars, who were wreaking havoc in Europe well into the age of Charlemagne, as Sigebert drove them off twice. And so therefore he was mythologized as a dragon slayer, because dragons were often symbols for great enemies. And then Brunhild was mythologized into the powerful Valkyrie Brunhilde, the love interest of Siegfried and Sigurd, due to her fearsomeness. She was known for being a skilled military and political leader in the Frankish kingdom of Austrasia, and was known for leading, after the death of her husband Sigebert, leading her kingdom through many hard times and through many great victories against her enemies. Which actually leads me into the next pair. Okay, so now that we've covered the Frankish king Sigebert and his wife Brunhild of Austrasia, Sigebert and Brunhild of Austrasia, are the next two individuals during the migration period who were deified we're going to look at are Fredegund, and the Visigothic queen of one of the other many Frankish kingdoms at the time, and the king of the Burgundians, Gunther. So, Fredegund, during her lifetime, was one of the many, well, sorry, not one of the many, she was the primary rival of Brunhild. And this is because supposedly Fredegund had originally been offered to Sigebert, this was done because after Sigebert had married Brunhild, his brother had originally wanted Brunhild and felt slighted, and so he married the Visigothic queen, Fredegund. And then eventually, after Sigebert and his brother died during their wars, the rivalry was continued by Brunhild and Fredegund, and they warred constantly throughout their lives, with Brunhild and her family eventually coming out on top, I believe. And so, because of this, Fredegund was mythologized into Gudrun and Kriemhild, and Gudrun in the Völsunga saga and Kriemhild in the Nibelung, who was the rival of the mythologized figure Brunhilde in the Völsunga saga, and Nibelung, who was the mythologized figure of Brunhild. And then we come over here to this individual, the Burgundian king, Gunther, who was known for being a skilled war leader and warrior, and a very skilled leader, and fought in many wars with the Franks and the Romans. And because of this, he was deified into the mythologized into the figure Gunnar in the Völsunga saga and Guntharius in the Nibelung. Furthermore, he was deified because just like in the Nibelung and the Völsunga saga, the Burgundians were at least, if not completely, at least for the most part, wiped out by the Huns, which I'll talk about more in a little bit. So with this in mind, one has to ask, why so many Frankish kings or royalty were mythologized into heroes? Well, that has a lot to do with the concept in Frankish society of sacral kingship, or the kings were divine, or at least semi-divine, due to their link with an event where a sea deity or something connected to the sea deity called the Quinotar, a minotaur mermaid of sorts, slept with the mother of the founder of the Salian and Ripuarian Franks, the Merovich, so therefore they were divine kings. And we have a lot of evidence for the belief of sacral kingship in Frankish tombs, such as that of Childeric I, this individual here, where in his tomb were found a very high status items, such as gold bulls, as bulls were seen as some form of, if not divine, at least some form of sacred importance due to their connection with the Quinotar, among others, including either these items that are either bees or cicadas that were connected with the spinning of fate, as well as rebirth, and as well as among other high status gold and grave goods. Then we have to move on to the next individual who was deified, mythologized, and that is the individual of Attila, Attila the Hun, the leader of the Hunnic Steppe Confederation, who was mythologized into the figure of Atli in both the Völsunga Saga and the Nibelung. And one has to ask, why was he deified? I mean, he was deified, mythologized into two sagas about the Frankish kings and their wars amongst each other and amongst other Germanic tribes, but he wasn't Frankish. So why was he mythologized if he wasn't one of these individuals? Well, this has pretty much everything to do with the fact that the Huns were the big bad at the time. See, the Huns, starting from at least the late 300 CEs, migrated from Central Asia and East Asia and occupied modern-day Hungary and Romania and Bulgaria, etc. And under Attila especially, led large-scale raids into the Eastern Roman Empire as well as the Western Roman Empire, sacking many cities. Like, for example, this is at least 15 cities, or 12 to 15 cities right here alone. So, in the case of Attila, he was mythologized not as a hero per se, but as a villain to the heroes, which still fits within this hero cult because of the role he plays in the Völsunga Saga and the Nibelung around Sigurd and Sigurd and Siegfried. Furthermore, as I said a few minutes ago, he was mythologized because of his, granted not his, the Huns did this before he took the throne, but the Hunnic destruction of the Burgundian kingdom. So this, while not a hero per se, this still fits within that category of a figure who was mythologized due to the great deeds done, and a great impact on a society. Keep in mind, I never said that they had to be good things that the impact was. They never had to be a good impact on a society. And this makes a lot of sense because we have a lot of archaeological evidence of the Huns, be it Hunnic cauldrons or the gold fibulae or belt buckles of sorts found in Hunnic contexts, and gold Hunnic bracelets. So we have quite a lot of archaeological evidence of these figures in history. So it makes a lot of sense for these figures to be carried on in the cultural and literary sphere. Now we go on to yet another hero. And this individual that we see here is the hero Dietrich von Bern, who is a medieval hero, often in connection to, viewed in connection to both Siegfried as well as other figures such as Wayland the Smith. And he performed many heroic deeds, including fighting a wild man. But the question is, who was he in history? Who is he possibly based on? Well, he's most likely based on, due to textual evidence, the Ostrogothic king Theodoric the Great, whom we have quite a lot of archaeological evidence of. We have gold coins from when he fashioned himself to be a Roman emperor after his conquest of Rome. And then we have other mentions of him in rune stones, such as this one from southern Sweden. And he was probably mythologized due to his skill as a military and political leader in Germanic culture. After all, he did create Ostrogothic rule of Rome. Like, he went in and conquered Rome and established himself as a quote-unquote Roman king. So, of course, he would be mythologized because he was a great leader. But he's not the only inspiration for Dietrich. In fact, Dietrich seems to have had two historical inspirations. The other inspiration being Frederick II, who was known for being himself a great military leader who ruled the whole Roman Empire, which is modern day Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium, northern Italy, and in fact, at some point in his life, he became king of Sicily. And he became a folk hero of sorts, doing quite a few things in folklore. In fact, sort of after his death, sort of became a King Arthur sort of figure, where it was described that he was buried at the bottom of a magical lake, and he would return and usher Germany and the whole Roman Empire into a golden era. And he was also described as being a patron of Christianity, which is interesting because the actual historical texts talk about him being, if not an atheist, he was very anti-establishment Christianity. But that aside, he was still a individual who was beloved by the Holy Roman Empire, did usher it into a form of a golden age, and was a very skilled military leader in general. So, with that in mind, many historians have looked at the similarities between Frederick II's life and the tales of Dietrich, and found quite a few very striking similarities, as well as the very striking similarities between Dietrich's life and Theodoric's life. So, with this in mind, we now see that the deification of heroes and individuals in Germanic culture continued well after the conversion to Christianity. After all, Dietrich's tale was from the High Middle Ages, the roughly 1000 to 1300-ish CE. But now we have to ask, we've looked at Roman period, the Roman period of Germania. We've looked at the migration period with the Germanic kingdoms, and we've now looked at the High Middle Ages. What about the height of Germanic influence, the Viking Age? Well, one individual comes immediately to mind during this age. Two individuals come immediately to mind during this age, and those are Beowulf, the slayer of Grendel and Grendel's mother, and Rolf Kraki, the essentially the Danish version of King Arthur. And with that in mind, we have to ask, well, who could be the inspiration, if any, for these individuals, for Beowulf and for Rolf Kraki? Well, we need to look no further than Gregory of Tours' History of the Franks, because in his History of the Franks, Gregory of Tours describes Danish raids on Frisia, the modern day Netherlands and Belgium, by the Danish king Calicicocus in 1516 CE, where he apparently he died in this raid. There's no way to sugarcoat that. But despite this, Gregory of Tours mentions him as being a king of both the Danes and the Geats. And so we have a name, or at least a possible name, to put on the inspiration for Beowulf. But we also have to ask, is there archaeological evidence to back this up, or is this yet another semi-mythical figure mentioned by Gregory of Tours? Well, the answer is yes, we do have archaeological evidence. For one thing, Beowulf talks about his helmet, or his maybe sort of like a fur headdress like berserkers would wear, but either way, his helmet bearing a boar. And we have quite a lot of archaeological evidence from both the Vendel period and Vendel period Scandinavia and the Anglo-Saxon England, where such as the pilgrim's helmet, among others, having boars figures on top. Furthermore, Beowulf talks about a great hall, Herut, being the seat of the Danish king Hrothgar, as well as Rolf Kroki's saga talking about a great hall being the seat of Rolf Kroki in Denmark. And archaeological evidence from 2013 found in the village of Lejre, dating to around 500 CE to 900 CE, a great hall had in fact been present in this town. In fact, this town is the oldest, or at least thought to be the oldest capital of the Kingdom of Denmark. And there's the hall right there, and a little map showing where, in context with the rest of the city, it would have been. And furthermore, from the village or city or whatever you want to call it, of Lejre, we find yet again more high status goods such as glass, beads, and jewelry, elaborate metalwork, and gold and silver, as well as trade connections with the the Scandinavian tribes of the Geats, whom, as you remember, Kallikrakas was described as the leader of, as well as Beowulf being described as both a war leader and eventually the king of the Geats and the tale of Beowulf. So while we don't necessarily have evidence of Kallikrakas himself, the historical mention of him by Gregory of Tours, combined with the archaeological excavations at Lejre, and Lejre being the oldest known capital of the Kingdom of Denmark, there is a lot of evidence to suggest that both Beowulf and Rolf Kroki were inspired by the king or kings of this region. Now we come on to our last hero, a hero very well known thanks to the recent show, the show that's been popular in the past few years, Vikings, Ragnar Lothbrok, or Ragnar Hairy Breeches. And the tale goes with Ragnar Lothbrok is essentially he slew a dragon with the help of his hairy breeches that were thick enough to stop the dragon's venom from fangs from piercing him and injecting venom into him. And he was eventually killed in a raid on England, where he was captured by the British king, Anglo-Saxon king Athelstan, and tossed into a snake pit. So, eventually also setting off the Great Heathen Army, as well as his supposed participation in the sack of Paris in 845 CE. So, with that in mind, we have to ask, was he an actual historical figure? Well, it's complicated. For one thing, the accounts of the sack of Paris in 845 CE do mention a figure named Ragnar leading them, or at least leading some contingents of the the Scandinavian army attacking Paris. But whether this was Ragnar Lothbrok himself or just an individual named Ragnar is hard to determine. In fact, it may never be proven. But that in mind, we have several little metal tablets from the Vendel period, such as this one over here, showing individuals in what looked to be furry or some form of furry breeches, battling serpents or dragons or what have you. And many individuals, such as Rudolf Simek, many scholars such as Rudolf Simek, suggest that this was depicting rites of passage for warriors. Say warriors would go out and do some form of rite of passage, and it involved this ceremonial outfit involving hairy, furry pants, like the pants of a bear or something like that. So, while we can't necessarily prove that Ragnar in the records of the Scandinavian sack of Paris was Ragnar Lothbrok, combining this textual evidence as well as the archaeological evidence showing rites of passage involving furry breeches in one form or regard for warriors, it does suggest that there's at least some historical inspiration for the mythologization of Ragnar Lothbrok. So, with all of that in mind, we can now, looking at the Nordic Bronze Age, Roman period Germania, migration period Europe with the expansion of the Germanic tribes, the High Middle Ages Holy Roman Empire, and the Viking Age, we can now, with at least a good degree of certainty, say that there in fact was a hero cult or hero cults in some form or the other. And so with this in mind, we can now take this knowledge and based off of the archaeological and textual evidence and use this to create hero cults in modern day heathenry. So with that, that ends this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and remember to like, share, and subscribe. And if you want me to cover any other subjects, heathen related or otherwise, please feel free to leave a comment. And I hope you all have a good day.